let's see if we can kind of quiet down a little bit. You can still wander. You can still wander, but please be quiet. Ooh, that worked very well. Oh, very good. If we could move towards our seats. Once again, we have a pair of, I think these are readers because they look the same from side to side, but reading glasses. And if anyone has lost a pair of reading glasses, we found them on the floor. They're black, kind of mostly rimless, and I'd say they're 2 diopters because it's the same as mine.
Let's have a look. No.
Maybe 2.5, maybe. I just did it till I needed 2.0s. But I might need 4.0s by the time it's over.
I just want to get it ready so we can do it.
Okay. I'd like to introduce Vernon Roth. Vernon is a new friend of mine. He's actually put pants on for this. And Bria, his sister, is here as well from Enota. And I know one of the things he'll be talking about is the so-called tesseract portal in the yard. It'd be nice to have one in everyone's backyard. We could all like visit each other all the time. He's spoken widely at several conferences in the past and will again in the future. I would like you all to welcome, please, Vernon Roth.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being here today. The first thing I would like to ask is that everybody, if you've got questions, I usually do an audience interaction, but we're looking at time constraints, so let's write down the questions and maybe either ask them at the end of the presentation or maybe outside at another time. So that's something that I would like to ask. Secondly, I would like to beg your indulgence. I've rewritten this lecture or this presentation about 3 times as I talk to different people, and they say, oh, that information needs to be presented. Oh, and that information is presented. And so this is like the 3rd iteration since I've been here. So we're going to, I hope that we're going to have some fun today, and I'm going to present some information. We're going to see some of the mechanisms behind what we're experiencing with the ORMUS, what we're experiencing with etheric technologies. My background is in etheric science, etheric engineering, and how to use the life force energy that we live in and move in and breathe in all the time as a means for health and power and consciousness. So, and by power I mean power generation and technologies. So, are we good to go on the cameras and all that? Okay, yippee. All right, our website is ancienttech.com, and my lecture is Ether and the Alchemy of Transformation. And that didn't work. Barely.
The mouse was easy.
It's not working at all. So,
You have to put the mouse cursor over on this side. Move it over to the right.
I see it working on this screen, but I'm not seeing it work up there.
Yeah, move it to the right, put it to the right of the screen. There you go.
Oh, there we go, okay.
Click there.
Okay. All right, excellent.
And get rid of the cursor if you could. And you just pull it down to the bottom.
There we go.
There you go. Now the other should work as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I want to start out with a little bit of background, a little bit of history, and what I'm presenting here is Is a different mode of thinking, a little bit different way of thinking than we've always been taught. We used to believe, before Einsteinian physics came along, we used to believe in the ether. We used to believe in that we moved in a sea of energy that everything came out of. All right? And I'll tell you, this is the absolute truth. We move in a sea of energy, and in this sea of energy, we get light. Ether condenses and becomes light. I have notes here because I've got some cool stories to tell. So if I look down, it's not that I'm ignoring you. Okay, how many people here are familiar with the science behind ether? Okay, I got 2 people. Raise your hand. Oh, there's another. Oh, there we go. Okay, we got 5. Good deal. Okay, this is like the beginner's guide, or maybe the ether for dummies. Okay, here's the deal. Before Einsteinian physics came along, we had ether physics. And ether physics is subtle. Einsteinian physics gives us big explosions like nuclear stuff and reactors and stuff. It's very cool, but ether physics is subtle. Okay? And ether supplanted, Einsteinian physics supplanted ether physics. There were several major debates between leading ether physicists and Einstein and other physicists of his ilk. And the ether physicists were the clear winners. And the experiments that were done, the Michelson-Morley experiments that disproved the existence of ether, were in fact, Michelson-Morley came back 20 years later and said, oops, we did them wrong. But Einsteinian physics had already taken over because, like I said, Einsteinian physics gives us big, powerful explosions and nuclear reactors and all these fun things that little boys like to play with. But ether physics says, I don't need something huge and powerful to cause a change. I just need to put the right type of energy in the right place. And I'm going to cause more change than the nuclear bomb ever thought of changing. Okay? So there's the essential difference between Einsteinian physics and ether physics. Ether physics is subtle. Subtle energies. Okay. From ether we get magnetism. From ether we get electricity. And I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but the idea that we're going to take a bunch of electrons in a battery and we're going to push it through a circuit and we're going to make something happen and those electrons are going to come around and that's where all the energy is, that is so wrong. It is so wrong. And quantum physics has actually proved it, but we won't see it in textbooks for 50 or 60 years. Okay? So, ether is where we get radiation from. Now, Nikola Tesla actually theorized this. He never was able to prove it during his lifetime, but 20, 30 years after he died, one of his friends was working on a drilling project. Einstein said that radiation is not inherent in the material itself. Radiation comes from space, the sun, from another source, and the material itself only emits radiation because it is an antenna. Its crystalline geometrical structure picks up this source of energy and radiates it out as radiation. 20, 30 years after he dies, one of his friends is working on a drilling project, and he didn't believe him. He said, I'm going to disprove Tesla. And so he takes a radioactive sample and drops it down into the earth with a Geiger counter. And they go down 10,000. This was an 18,000 foot well. They go down 10,000 feet, still ticking. 15,000 feet, still ticking. Somewhere between 16 and 17,000 feet down, all the radiation went away. And when they pulled that radioactive sample, I mean, it was a good amount of radiation. When they pulled it out of the ground, it was completely silent for about 3 days before it started picking up the energy coming into it from space. So we start to get a picture that certain elements, certain things in this world are antennas because of their crystalline geometrical structure. And I'll say that a lot. If I say it too much, just tell me. Because of its structure, it picks up energy, it draws energy into it, and manifests in certain ways. So this is a paradigm shift. This is a way that we have to start thinking differently because we know where Einsteinian physics goes. Fukushima. We know the problems that Einsteinian physics gives us, And it ultimately ends in destruction because we can't leave the solar system, we can't transcend spiritually as a species, basing our lives on Einsteinian physics, unfortunately. Now, I have nothing against Einstein himself, I have something against where all of his theories and ideas actually went based on his work. So, here's one. Ether energy is a source of gravity. Wow, wait a minute. Ether energy is a source of gravity? Does that mean that gravity itself is not a force? That we could find ways to counteract it? Absolutely. And we'll be talking about that later on. And here's one. Ether energy is the source of time. Okay? Now, this is a hard one to understand. It's a hard one to accept because time is, solid, right? But I will let you know. I've traveled through time. You've all traveled through time. You're all time travelers. We just usually go one way, but ether allows us to go other ways once we understand how ether condenses. So let's move on. I wanted to put this up here. Ether means, and how this relates to ORMUS, we'll come back. Trust me, we'll get there. Ether means to kindle, burn, or shine. It signifies a substance which was thought in ancient times to contain the manipulative forces beyond control. What? Has anybody ever heard of anything that would be beyond ether, beyond the energy that we exist in right now?
Spirit.
Spirit is another word for it. The Tibetans called it the Bardo. Okay, so that said, we're going to move over here to... Yes, we're going to move over here to the whiteboard. Now, if you can imagine that there exists a field of energy here that contains all places and all times and everything at once. And this is what the Tibetans actually called the Bardo, and they had rites of initiation that would teach people to navigate the Bardo. And this goes back even further than we could possibly comprehend. But the energy that contains the Bardo, that emanates from the Bardo, that allows us to interact with it, is actually the ether. And etheric energy is present all around us, and I'm drawing it, in stages because that helps our three-dimensional linear minds actually understand it. But if you really want to understand it, do some deep meditations, go into theta state, and then take a look at this, and then you'll really get the picture. But how this ether condenses gives us electricity. How this ether condenses into spirals and complex patterns gives us things like magnetism. Okay? That's a lie, by the way. Magnets don't look like that, but we'll get into that later. How ether condenses gives us things like stars and planets. Did you know that there's a standing wave? There's a standing wave around every single sun. Every single sun that has planets that literally gather matter into them and form them into planets. And this is actually being proved. Nassim Haramein's work, different people are actually proving this over and over again, that the suns themselves, the matter doesn't shoot out from the suns. The suns themselves are condensations of the ether, and there's standing waves in rings around them. And as the standing waves gather in more and more matter and energy, that's where the planets are formed. Oh, anybody heard of Elenin? Okay. Did you know that... Sorry, I have to do this. I love digressions a little bit. Here's the sun. Here's the earth. Here's Elenin. It's not a phi distance apart, but it's a phi ratio. When they were in line, anybody want to guess what happened? And a phi ratio? Not Fukushima, but the earthquake that caused it.
Yeah.
Okay? In exact line. Isn't that amazing? Because now, we get alignments all the time with stars and planets and such that don't cause earthquakes. However, anybody here from Hawaii? Thank you. There was a gentleman that was trained as a Hawaiian shaman, and he became an astrophysicist, and he found a correlation between ancient myths in Hawaii and the earthquake goddess and being the moon, and he's actually able to predict with 95% accuracy where earthquakes appear based on cycles of the moon and how close the moon is to the planet. Wow, I'm getting off subject. Sorry. Anyway, just so much information, so much fun. It's so much fun for me to be here and present this. So, ether becomes matter with by certain mechanisms. Okay, ether becomes energy and semi-tangible energy. And this, I'm talking about. Well, we'll get into that. Ether becomes energy and matter in certain mechanisms. The vortex. Now, we think of a vortex. Whenever we think of a vortex, we think of tornadoes and hurricanes and such. Oh, there's so much. Did you know that in 10 minutes, in a class 4 hurricane, not even a 5, but a 4 hurricane, in 10 minutes, nature expends more energy than every single nuclear bomb on the planet combined. And how many times a year does she do that? And for not 10 minutes, but a long time? Wow, okay, so anyway, digression. Okay, implosion and nexus points. This gets into time, and I don't think that I have time to go into it, but...
We like you when you do.
Okay. If anybody does travel through time and they decide they want to change something, it's not as easy as you think. There's no butterfly effect where you step on a bug and all that. Because time and events based on time are energies that move through the universe. And I am a vortex that moves through the universe. And you are a vortex that moves through the universe. And all of us have moved in these spiral patterns to this particular place, this right here that we're going to call the ORMUS conference. Okay? Now, this is an energy that's going to happen. And if you travel through time and go back here, it's incredibly difficult to stop this without generating as much energy as it requires to make this to pull it over here. But anyway, so the butterfly effect is a lie, but we won't go into that. How did I get there again? Oh, somebody mentioned time travel. Drag it all. Okay. What's up? Yeah, exactly. I'll get back on stage and tell myself not to do that. Okay. The other way that ether manifests into physical reality is in geometrical patterns. And I'm not very good at this, but what I have just done is drawn a picture of the crystalline geometrical pattern of something that we all love to play with. That's gold. The crystalline geometrical pattern of gold. And I just happen to have memorized that one. I didn't draw it very well, but ether condenses into physical matter into crystalline geometrical patterns. And so if we can find the proper crystalline pattern, we can draw in more energy, right? And so we'll get into that. We'll get into antennas here pretty soon. But that's an example of crystalline geometrical patterns. Ether loves to move in spirals, and it loves recursive spirals. As a matter of fact, electricity is formed when a spiraling fractal of ether energy meets itself and multiplies on itself, and it becomes recurring, and that's when we get things like electricity. So, moving right along. Okay, stages of manifestation. Oh, we were there, weren't we? I was getting ahead of myself. The stages of manifestation are from the Bardo, which we won't go into any more than that, to the ether, which we live, breathe, and move through all the time, to energy, electricity, and the stages of matter are interesting because, excuse me, there are points where the matter is not completely formed. If we look at ether and we look at its formation, since we're here and we all deal with it, let's just write it up there. Okay, as it forms into matter, it goes through many stages, and everything in here is what we call, there are many names for it, it's what we call primitive matter. And there's even stages in that. How many people have seen kind of stages in this manifestation? Certain ORMUSes seem to be lighter, some ORMUSes are heavier. We've got the etheric, what we call etheric or non-atomic. And then we've got excuse me, and then we have the different levels and different types of ORMUS. The ORMUS that's more apt to crawl out of the bottle, the ORMUS that is lighter. Any alchemists do here. I've done the fractions of water, the distillations of swamp water. Thank you. When you distill water, some very interesting things happen. I'll talk a little bit more about this later. But if you were to distill a gallon jug of water, the first quart that comes off, the alchemists would call the quart, or the fire of water. The second quart is the air of water. The third quart is the earth of water, and the last quart is the water of water. And every quart, every fraction of that has specific purposes. And I've taken, literally, I swear, I've taken the fire of water, the first quart of water that came off of some long digested and fermented water, and that water did not freeze until minus 10 degrees. Literally did not. And the next one down, the air of water, the second fraction, when it froze at 32 degrees, and it expanded. It didn't expand like regular ice. It expanded from here to about here. It expanded like twice as much. So the reality is that there's different parts of water, just like there's different parts of matter and stages of matter that respond differently. So all the expansion we see actually comes from a specific part of it. Okay? And all of the combustibility, I took that fire of water and put that into a hydrogen device. Oh boy, howdy. Good stuff. Anyway, moving right along. Any questions so far? Okay. I'll get to that. We'll get there. Yeah, it's one. Yeah. Anyway, we'll get there. Okay. This primitive matter that we talk about. This is the ORMUS that we've been discussing. And I've actually had a few questions by a few different people. They said, could you distill it just a little bit? So here's what we're going to do. The primitive matter, the ORMUS, the etheric elements that we talk about, are formed in a number of different ways. They're formed on rocks. They collect there from space. They're left over from the creation of the earth, as David talked about. Forms on rocks. If you go out to the desert, I did this down near Albuquerque all the time. You go out there. Rocks in the early morning sometimes have it on it, but then generally you turn the rocks over and there's this white powder on the bottom of the rocks. You scrape that off. It's really powerful stuff. It's really, really good stuff. That's this primitive matter. From the air, and we've talked about air traps, how we can swirl the air, and using magnets to kind of do this push-pull thing with the primitive matter, we can drop out materials from the air. Well, I would actually argue at that point that we're actually forming ether matter into physical matter, because our ether energy and physical matter using magnets, which it responds to in certain ways. But that's semantics, and it doesn't matter at this point in the game. We just know that we can do it, right? Isn't that the most important thing? We don't need to argue about the math and the stuff behind it. Trap water, we've talked a lot about the trap water. I really like ocean water. I worked with, I met several times with someone that everybody here doesn't like, and he taught me some very interesting things about ocean water. Did you know that we're talking about helium-3 and being the most powerful energy source on the planet? It's not, but it's a really decent power source. Did you know that if you go down 5 to 10,000 feet underwater, the predominant element down there is helium-3? You know, on the surface of the water, on the surface of the planet, there's like 9 tablespoons in the entire planet. But if you go down into the ocean, it's readily abundant. I've seen stuff made from the ORMUS down there. I've seen fibers woven from the ORMUS down there at 10,000 feet. And these fibers, they made them into a sweater, and they'll stop a 50-caliber bullet. Okay, and it's no more thick than maybe 2 of the shirts that we're all wearing here today. And I tried to cut it. I tried to cut it with a pair of fingernail clippers. I could not cut a strand of it. I had to literally pull this thing apart. I got one filament the size smaller than a hair before I could actually cut it with a fingernail clippers, and it dented the fingernail clippers. Okay? So that's ORMUS from the ocean, guys. It's powerful. And the mechanism behind that is it takes transverse pressure and turns it into translateral energy, reinforcing the molecular bonds of the metal. But that's crystalline geometrical patterns, and I'm saying that too much. Okay. The next source is, we can do this artificially. And one of the ways that I love to do this, and we do this all the time, literally all the time, we make elements, is through a spark gap. And here's where we get back to the quantum energy field. Now remember I said we don't push electrons. So it was like David talking about your heart. The heart can't push the blood through. It's physically impossible. It's physically impossible to push electrons through the wire. In reality, what we've done, if we have a circuit, we have a battery here, and we have a little light bulb, I love that. Anybody see Despicable Me? Anyway, the electricity flows through the circuit, right? That's what we've all been taught. That's conventional physics, and we get light. The reality is what we've done is we have created an environment, a very specific environment that allows, physicists will call this quantum cloud, but I prefer ether because it's more encompassing. We've created an environment that will allow the etheric energy to collapse into the circuit. And that circuit, how it's designed, will cause the etheric energy to collapse in a certain way. And we get light, and we get voltage, and we get amperage flowing through there. It's not really what's happening, but it's the ether that is collapsing into it. It's a vacuum. You've created an environment. Oh, and the ether says, oh, look, it's an environment that I understand. And it goes in and manifests what we call electricity. When you start thinking of electricity that way, when you start thinking of all energy that way, so many things become possible. Because then you got that, what's the guy's name in Canada who makes circuits out of macaroni? What's that?
Hutchinson.
It's not Hutchinson. It's maybe it is Hutchinson. Is it that makes circuits out of macaroni and
Well, crushes up the rocks and puts down the metals that use circ knives into iron bars.
different guy.
Different guy?
Different guy. This guy, I call him a kid. He was mentally brain damaged. He's 50-some years old now, but he'll draw a cell phone on a piece of paper, and he'll say, somebody give me a telephone number, and then he'll dial the cell phone, and the cell phone will ring. Okay? Because he knows how to order the etheric energy into a pattern that it recognizes, and it respects his intention. Okay? But here's the thing: he can do the same thing. He can make a superconductor computer on a piece of paper with macaroni, Stick it under yours, and your computer will become a supercomputer. Okay? He's done this many times because he understands this, not what we've been taught, but the reality behind it. Okay? So, with a spark gaps, Tesla loves spark gaps, and he said that's where the key is. When you create a spark gap in a circuit, you actually are collapsing the ether into that location, and there's an overabundance of ether because it's so, that's the environment that you've given it. You've given it a place to manifest without having to conform to this. You've given it a place to manifest, and so you can have anomalous reactions. We found in arcing, in specific type of arcing, who's here worked with an arc welder? Okay? How does an arc of metal and electricity create things like alpha, beta, gamma, and ultraviolet radiation? Okay? The ether doesn't know what to do with it, so it just becomes whatever it wants to. Okay? Now there's people actually harnessing that. You know, yeah, this is just so cool, I can just talk about it. Okay. There's people actually, you know, that would take too long to explain, never mind. Oh, dude. All right. Tom, I'm sorry. Okay. There's some guys at a university in Canada that created a stainless steel sphere.
We have 30 minutes.
And they filled the stainless steel sphere with water, deuterium, and then they spin the sphere super fast, and they spread that out, and they create a vacuum. It's vacuum so fast, it's spinning so fast that they create a vacuum in there, and then they inject plasma into the vacuum itself. Okay? And at the moment that they inject the plasma, they've got a whole bunch of rods that are hooked up to a pneumatic cylinder or pneumatic pressure, and they, bam, hit the stainless steel sphere, creating shock waves. You know what they create? They create a geometrical construct in the vacuum and the plasma. A geometrical construct, maybe you guys have heard of it, it's called an icosahedron. And they create this geometrical construct, and you know what comes out of that geometrical construct of plasma? Every known form of energy on the planet. The water absorbs the radiation, but the heat and the electromagnetism and everything are taken off of the sphere. And this one sphere, approximately 5 feet in diameter, generates way more electricity than Fukushima ever thought of. In a split second. Oh, wait, was that a crystalline geometrical structure of something there? Thank you, all right. And we, of course, can make artificial sources of primitive matter by doing sodium burns as well. Moving right along. Okay. There are 3 ways to channel and manipulate ether. Okay? Alchemically, mechanically, and chemically. And we're going to go into each one of those. We don't like to think of chemicals, but really, when we work with lye, we're actually crossing the bridge between alchemy and regular chemistry, because we are dropping things out and creating and allowing the primitive matter, the ORMUS, the etheric elements to manifest, but we are chemically dropping them out. Another technique is the ozone, and I love the fact that David talked about this too, is but ozone in a high energy state, once you run it through olive oil, can actually, and what that actually does is it puts carbon onto the ozone and allows it to be in a bioavailable state. But the ozone will actually restructure water so the crystalline formations are more apt to draw in etheric energy. Okay? Water is one of the greatest and most powerful accumulators of etheric energy, and if you can harness that, well, we'll be talking about that. So I just wanted to put that up there to, you know, we have to know that we can do this in many different ways. The second way is alchemically. We can gather in etheric energy alchemically. And one of the ways that I absolutely love to do it is endothermic impulsive reactions. I work with hydrogen. Hydrogen is so incredibly cool. When you separate water, separate it and recombine it. Any alchemists in here ever separated and recombined something?
Yay.
Yeah. When you separate water and immediately recombine it, magical things can happen. Okay? I didn't have enough room or enough, there's too much weight to bring this, but a water torch where you separate the water into oxygen and hydrogen and then recombine it as a flame, it's amazing. I can cut through concrete as easily as I can cut through steel. It's called Brown's gas. With very little energy, you can cut through anything. We slice through space shuttle tiles all day long. Those things are supposed to go to 9,000 degrees. We vaporize tungsten in seconds. Yes?
I worked with the old Brown back in the early 90s. You can also neutralize radioactive waste with it.
I'm getting to that one. You can neutralize radioactive waste because you destroy the crystalline structure of the radioactive waste on a molecular level. Yeah?
Suppose they won't burn your hand?
That's kind of a fallacy. When you see a flame from a Brown's gas torch, you see an orange flame, and I'll show you pictures of this on my computer if anybody's interested. You see an orange flame. Hydrogen and oxygen burn invisibly. You can't see it. What you're seeing is an implosive reaction of burning air. Literally, wait a minute. Okay, what's air made out of? Nitrogen and oxygen. Hey, wait a minute. I'm burning air. I'm not just burning the O2, I'm burning the nitrogen. When you start playing with alchemy, anything can become a fuel. Anything can be burned. Okay? Anything can be destroyed because nothing is destroyed, right? So what you're seeing when you have a torch is you're seeing the burning air. When a person runs a hydrogen, do not do this with a propane or oxygen acetylene torch or anything. But when you run a hydrogen and oxygen torch across your hand, what you're actually doing is you're moving the flame you're moving it across your hand faster than what's actually being burned. So it's safer than a propane or a torch where if you hold that there for a tenth of a second, it's all over. But if you hold it in your hand in a Brown's gas flame, it will burn through you. But the funny thing is, I can put it in the water and it won't heat up the water. But if I've got a pan of water, a stainless steel pan, and I'm putting it in the water, I can run it there all day because it's what it wants to return to. It returns to its natural state. But if I move it around to the underside